Now, two young historians from opposite ends of the thought spectrum join me live on Modi's war on the Macaulay Putra, Dr. Ruchika Sharma and Professor Hindol Sengupta. Welcome to you both. Thank you very much for your time. Dr. Sharma, I'll start it off with you. You've heard the Prime Minister's words. He expanded what he said about Macaulay ke aulad, intensifying what he says is a necessary fight against the Macaulay mindset. In your view, a legitimate fight, a legitimate reckoning that the Prime Minister has taken on?
One thing I couldn't help but notice is that the Prime Minister kept on repeating how Macaulay actually pushed us into a slave mindset. I am going to read a few lines of a fantastic poem by Savitribai Phule. She needs no introduction. She was the stalwart of Dalit education, stalwart of women's education. And it's a fantastic poem. It's called Mother English. It's written, of course, in Marathi. It's called Ingreji Mauli in Marathi. Mother English and the English language resolve to uplift Shudras. Mother English, not the Mughals, not the Peshwai, that foolhardy reign. Mother English grants real knowledge and with care offers Shudras a life. Mother English feeds mother's milk to Shudras and nurtures Shudras like a grandmother, Aji. Mother English breaks brutality, what she calls as Pashutva, and offers humanity, Manushyatva, to the Shudra people. If you read people like Savitribai Phule and Jyotiba Phule, you'll actually get an exact opposite picture. What they are arguing is that the English language and the English education actually helped uplift women as well as the Shudras. Jyotiba Phule received his education in an English missionary school. He read Thomas Penn's Rights of Man, and that revolutionized him. He went on to question that if all castes can actually participate in the army, why can't all castes receive education? In fact, this is the first time education is firstly democratized in India. It had for years and years and for ages and ages kept away from the caste marginalized and from the women. How does it happen? It happened because of English education. I have other examples to quote. Pandita Ramabai.
Okay.
She writes High Caste Hindu Woman in the 20th century. It's a book in English and it attacks very vehemently from an upper caste woman's perspective the ideals of sati, the ideals of child marriage. She talks about how her own mother was 9 years of age when she was married to Ramabai's father, who was 44 years of age. And what is common in all of these three, whether it's the Phules or Ramabai, is how when education was in the hands of the Brahmins, when education was in the hands of the Sanskrit-speaking people, it was actually contained in very few sectors and very few pockets. What democratizes education, of course, is the English language. So I would actually disagree with the Prime Minister here. I would think that quoting Savitribai Phule, Jyotiba Phule as well as Ramabai, that this is actually an education that for the first time frees people from the slave mindset.
Okay, it frees people from the slave mindset, says Dr. Ruchika Sharma. Professor Sengupta, what's your take on the Prime Minister's war on Macaulay ke aulad? Legitimate?
I think we should take a slightly broader perspective to this. If you look at world history, there is not a single power that has risen in the world on the basis of a borrowed language. Did Meiji Restoration need English? No. Did the Chinese need English? Do they need it today? No. You look at any great power that has risen in the world, they have not risen on the basis of borrowed language. In fact, even today, the great soft power of South Korea, the Hallyu, the so-called Hallyu wave, so to speak, does not depend on the English language. Of course, as I'm sure all of us know, UNESCO research and many others in 2020, UNESCO research and UNICEF research and many others, worked on this. And in fact, UNICEF even suggested that the fundamental primary education should be given to people in their mother tongue. It is their mother tongue that allows people to understand, grasp, and embrace knowledge the best. The problem is not English and the way that we have embraced English. The problem is that we have created a class hierarchy using English. Angus Madison, the economist, famously calculated global economic history and came to the conclusion that long before the British came to India, India had about, depending on which year you're looking at, about a quarter of the global GDP. It was one of the richest countries in the world. So if you look at example after example, even if people, some people may say that, Mughal rule in India was glorious. And even for those people who say that, please remember, if you argue that it was glorious without the English language.
I want to talk. Yeah, I hear you. I want to talk about some specifics
we
because
must take English
yes.
and make it our own. It has become toxic because we've created a class among in our country with people who know English at the top and the rest, in a sense, below them.
Some people would argue that education, the English language, these were all side effects of what was essentially an imperialist impulse, and we can't be crediting Macaulay with that, and that can't be the bone of what we're talking about. But Dr. Sharma, coming to you, I want to try and get a little bit specific here. Who do you think the Prime Minister is talking about when he talks about Macaulay Putra or Macaulay ke Aulad? Who is he talking about?
Well, I think that's a question best answered by the Prime Minister himself. But what I can certainly assure you is that this idea that somehow speaking in a foreign language means we are becoming slaves is a very outdated idea. I'm going to go back to history again, as all my examples are from history. There was a fantastic man called Dr. Ramachandra, Master Ramachandra. He was a fantastic mathematician and he received an award for a fantastic paper that he wrote in English. The paper was on problems of solving maxima and minima. But what's fantastic in that paper was, and what really made it stand out, is that he deliberately used algebra as a system to show that through algebra as well, problems of maxima and minima can be solved without using calculus, which he thought was a Western import. And algebra was an Indian way of doing mathematics. And this is exactly why I think the language does not matter. What this person tried to do was basically to import an Indian education idea, an Indian education system, but he did it in a different language. The language in itself doesn't matter. What matters is, are your principles rooted in your country? Are they rooted in your nation? Are they rooted in your own history? And that is exactly what stalwarts like Ramachandra did. Another very fantastic example is the Bethune College. It was a fantastic experimentation in how, if you remove Christian missionaries from education, this was a secular college in the 1850s and secular school in the 1850s, it can become a successful experiment. You had Sarla Devi Chaudharani, this fantastic woman who patronized female education. She did her entire English education from this particular college. You had the Chittagong uprising stalwart Kalpana Datta, who also did her education from here. These are all people who gained English education and then realized that they are actually being enslaved by the English and went on to win the freedom struggle, to win the freedom of independence, to win the struggle of independence against the English. So I think it's a fantastic idea to use their language, to use their idea.
I don't think there's a debate on on the benefits and the many of the things that you're listing on. But Professor Sengupta, again, I want to draw you into what the Prime Minister meant when he was talking about this. Was he talking about a certain kind of people? We know it's a mindset. We do know that there have, actions have been taken by the Prime Minister and this government as far as a larger sort of anti-colonial drive or to rid India of its colonial trappings. Who is he talking about?
I think there's a simple answer to that. And the simple answer to that is that after independence, there was a class of Indians that created, of course, during the British period too, who were essentially colloquially, of course, called brown sahibs and many other, less, polite terms. But they were people who were basically intermediaries between the quote unquote native population and the British colonial masters. By the way, since we're talking about Bengal, I want to point out that Tagore did not win the Nobel by writing in English. So, the moot point is that this class of people that continued throughout the British period and remained the primary interlocutors between power and those who are supplicants in a sense. This small group of elite people who, in fact, many of them only had English as their main tool. Many of them were not very conversant with other Indian languages. they toxified this entire atmosphere so much so that, as I was saying, a new kind of class system got created in India, whereas those who could speak English, those who had English, those who could converse in English, write in English, they had access to a whole layer of goods and services and to the world, whereas the whole range of people below them who did not have access to English did not have access to these things. Now, again, I don't have a problem with the English language at all. What I have a problem with is this class system. This class system is fundamentally toxic. It keeps away. India did not invent, as it were, the zero because we had the English language. We have been kept away in many senses. Vast numbers of people in India have been kept away from access to privilege, access to power, access to institutions, access to a whole range of things, including our judicial system. Why is it primarily in English? Why? Why is it primarily in English? Why are we still following the colonial norms of the judicial system left behind by the British? It makes no sense. Can you see the vast numbers of people in this country who are kept away from any understanding or access to institutions because of this? So this has become toxic in our country.
Okay, I've got 2 minutes left, so I'm going to give 60 seconds to the both of you. Dr. Sharma, to you first. A toxic class system, that's based on a mindset, a Brown Sahib mindset that still exists, and it's a legitimate, war to actually declare, says, I'm only paraphrasing, of course, what Professor Sengupta says. Final word from you, and then I'll end with Hindol.
I actually think that the English education and the English language, by granting education to women as well as the caste marginalized, actually oppose the toxic system. And history has been, witness to that. So I don't know what he means by creating a toxic group of people and this class system, because this is the first time that the women actually got education. So is he saying that women who could speak English, who could write in English, who actually got education for the first time in English, were the toxic group of people? The Dalits who got education for the first time again in English were the toxic group of people. So I would really like to, for Professor Sengupta as well as the Prime Minister, to actually flesh out who these Macaulay Putras are. Because if we look at history, these are the first people, women as well as the caste marginalized, who got the English education, and English really helped them, uplifted them. As Jyotiba Phule said, it was a means to social reform. Right? Reforms like sati, like widow remarriage, etc. happened through the course of the English education.
Last 60 seconds.
Therefore, like to argue. So therefore, I would like to argue that I don't think it creates the toxic culture that we're talking about. It actually broke that toxic.
Okay, I started with Dr. Sharma. I'll end with Professor Sengupta. Go ahead. Final word.
It's a great example of why I say that a whole culture is kept away from people who only see everything through English. We're a country where women philosophers were being spoken about. Even in the Upanishadic era, we had figures like Gargi, which were being mentioned in those ancient texts. And we are claiming that supposedly education only came to women with English. This is so utterly false that it is, what can I say? It's laughable. This is just not true. I'm not suggesting there wouldn't have been problems in society. There could have been problems in society. But to suggest that education came to women in our country only because of English is patently false. I'm not saying we shouldn't use the English language, but I do think that even today, a vast number of our country people are kept away from institutions, especially civic institutions and legal institutions, because of the dominance of English. And I think this should break. We should really make the country more equitable so that people can access services in their mother tongue, in the language that they're most comfortable with, both knowledge and services.
Okay, who are the Macaulay Putra? They walk among us. Well, we don't know who they are. We haven't been able to take a name today, but the Prime Minister, no less, has declared war. Professor Hindol Sengupta, Dr. Ruchika Sharma, this was fun. Thank you very much for being with me tonight on India Matters.